Welcome to the Doctors Making a Difference podcast. I'd like to welcome Nimish Patel today, who's on the podcast, and I appreciate you taking the time to be with us. And would you mind introducing yourself to the audience?
Yes, a pleasure to meet you, Peter, as well. So Nimish Patel here. I'm a neurosurgeon. I've been in practice for about 17 years with the same health system, Methodist Health System, based out of Dallas, Texas. And I happen to have the opportunity to, and I say opportunity because I lead a group of neurosurgeons for the last 10 plus years. And it's been a great job. And with that comes a lot of ups and downs, and I've learned a lot. And I can say that things are going quite well. So, pleasure to meet everyone as well as you as well, Peter.
Yeah, thank you. No, that's great. So you've been at the same group for 17 years, it sounds like. That's wonderful.
I have, yeah. The statistics are, most people change their jobs, at least neurosurgery wise, they change their jobs in the first 3 years. And I've been very lucky to the fact that that hasn't happened, or maybe I just don't know any better, So yeah,
Maybe,
but
well, it's true because if you look around, and it's not just neurosurgery, I feel like it's become kind of the norm for people to switch jobs every few years. And so that's quite a remarkable thing that you found a group, a collegial group, and a place where you continue to really have a tremendous influence there. That's awesome. I'm
yeah.
curious a little bit about how you, as we get into this, maybe we'll come back to it, how you've chosen medicine and how you chose to stay in that particular area, despite so many different opportunities and challenges.
Yeah, thanks for asking me. One of the things that inspired me to write the book was, in order to know where you want to go next, you have to know where you have come from. And just very quick to give you my background is I grew up in a small town called Berea, Kentucky, town of 9,000 people. My mom and dad are business owners, and we worked inside of a motel. So,
Hmm.
and so I lived inside of a motel. And essentially, we grew up running the business, all the way to high school. And at that point in time, my folks were like, you're going to work or you're going to go into medicine. It was very cut and dry,
Oh,
immigrant
really?
family. Yeah, it's cut and dry. It's like, and I wasn't going back to where I was. It was a good home, but it wasn't where I wanted to go, kind of, and wanted to stay. And they didn't want me to stay there. And so for me, the journey was just to further the education somehow. Now, fast forward through some lumps and bumps through college. I did a victory lap in college, and
Nice.
and then I eventually went into medicine. But here's the funny thing: I when I started medicine, and it was the stock market was hot, and everybody knew how to trade, and I wanted to be an ER doctor because ER was very popular at the time with George Clooney and Peter Benton and all those those characters. And I thought that's what I wanted to do. But what you find out is those who are traveling for medicine, and your listeners as well as you find out what you don't like. And so I found out that I am better suited for things where I fix things and make things better. And I think that goes back to my days of fixing bike chains. So I
Yeah.
knew I didn't want to do surgery. And so you kind of fumble around through surgery and figure it out. And I heard that there was this really smart group of people called neurosurgeons. I don't even think I could spell neurosurgeon at the time. And in my third year of medicine, third year rotation, and I didn't know anything, the first thing about neurosurgery. And I was like, well, let me go check this out because it sounds really, kind of fancy, and there's a lot of masculinity and kind of like, things that I was looking for personally. And what I found was I found a really good resident that basically took me under his wing and let me shadow him like a shadow. And I loved the field of the craft. And I was lucky to have such a good resident who was also very good at able to communicate and be able to show me how to get things done, not through with a scalpel, but with his words and his actions, his influence. And so that was one of the first times that I noticed that, hey, and at that time, I didn't realize what an impression that would make on me from an emotional intelligence standpoint. But I knew I loved neurosurgery, and I knew that I knew something about, Norman that taught me something, but it only would play out later in my life, which is now 17 years in my career.
That's pretty cool. Well, I think that's interesting, and almost everybody I've talked to on this show, has a background where they say it wasn't like this clearly defined path, like, oh, I'm a elementary school, middle school kid, and I'm going to be a doctor someday and have it all figured out. And it sounds like, I like your victory lap statement. I,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think we all chuckle because one of the success stories, I think all of us who are look back and reflect on our success it's where we fell and skinned our knees and got back up. And it's so at that when you hear it, now you're like, that's the recipe for success. When you're in it, it's so lonely, it's so difficult, and you don't believe it. But I think that to me was it's resilience. I'll share one quick story with you as
Yeah.
well. Resilience. So, as I mentioned, we have a group of neurosurgeons that I manage. I manage about 10 of them. I don't manage them; I lead them. Let me
Right.
change the
Big
word.
difference. Big
There's a
difference.
big difference, and we can talk a little bit about what that means. I had a dinner at the house, and we were all sitting around. And I asked, "Well, how did you get into neurosurgery?" Every one of them, except for two people in my group, we had a different career before they went into neurosurgery.
Oh,
And
interesting.
the word that came out about, well, what makes you a neurosurgeon? What's the skill that makes you a neurosurgeon or any kind of physician that requires a lot of time? And the word is resilience. And so that goes back to my skin knee comment. It's like the more you fall, but you can get back up, the more successful you will be.
No, and that makes sense. I've got kids, and I feel like we have this conversation every day. Like, okay,
Yes.
this is hard, and it seems like the world is ending right now because something didn't work out. But you got to be resilient and hold your head up and say, okay, instead of being conquered by this moment, I'm going to go on and see the next thing. Or another way to think about it is, we don't want to judge ourselves or other people by their worst moment. It's easy to do that, but like I like the skin knee analogy because that's kind of a low moment, and then once you get up and keep going, then you can find your way forward to do something, the next big step.
Yeah. And then having children, I have three daughters as well. So having, they're 11, 9, and 5, having to work through their emotional ups and downs reminds me of what I went through. And so it empowers me to kind of stay the course even now in my adulthood of being able to, whatever I teach them, I have to live it as well. So kids are a wonderful reflection of the way we should live life as well. Even though we think we have been very successful, but how do you keep flying higher, and the kids will help you do that.
Yeah. Well, so you went through this process. You made it through your undergraduate years, medical school. It sounds like you had an awesome mentor during medical school who kind of showed you the way to that path to neurosurgery. And then I'm just interested as that career has gone on, how did you find kind of resonance with that? All medical careers are long. Neurosurgery is particularly long with the training, and some people joke that they never see a neurosurgery attending because they're residents forever. And I was curious, how did you find your place in that challenging career?
I think one of those things is those who enter at least our field of neurosurgery, you got to want it. And for whatever reason, psychological disturbance, or you enjoy the science or whatever. I think you want, and so you don't know any better when you enter the field, and then you give yourself into the craft for that many years, and you realize that it's just going to have some ups and downs. And I will say the field of neurosurgery is a wonderful field. I have tremendous amount of respect for it, and I feel very lucky to be part of a group of colleagues that are just marvelous. But neurosurgery training, to be an excellent at anything, neurosurgeon, physician, or whatever you are, OBGYN, it comes at a cost. And it comes at a cost of not developing other skills that you don't find out until you hit the real world. And you're like, oh my goodness, that my craft will get me far, but it won't help me get to the next level. And that's how I kind of evolved into what I do now. And the book came about as well.
Yeah. Kind of, yeah, to walk us through the book, if you don't mind, tell the audience about the book you wrote, but kind of why, you're a busy neurosurgeon, you've got lots of stuff on your plate, and you're in a busy time of life raising three kids. And, how did you decide to write a book? That's it's just an interesting sidestep. And I think it's powerful to hear that from someone, not from the outside, but from someone on the inside, right in the middle of a career in medicine to write a book, and much less a
Uh,
book about emotional intelligence. I'd really like to hear about it.
yeah, Peter, I think you nailed it. I would say to my brothers and sisters, and I, this was not something I had planned. I'm not a voracious reader. At least I wasn't. I am now, but I wasn't back then, and I wasn't much of a writer either. it happened to me, and I think it happens to all of us who are in mid-career of our craft. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I've been practicing 17 years. Around year 7 for me, I came home one day from work and I sat down at the table, and I remember it was like a fall evening, and I sat down and I was sifting through the mail, looking through the bills and the AARP invitation, which was kind of odd, but that piece of like that piece of mail that like, why are they giving this to me? And my wife sits down, and I said to her, I said, babe, I just don't feel it. I mean, I don't know what, every day I go in and I work, and I just, it feels empty. And I remember saying that to her, and at that time, mind you, 7th year practice, my practice was flourishing. I had all the economic success that I would ever thought of as a kid, from those motel days back in Berea. I had all that covered. But something in me was just kind of like, okay, is this it? Is this it? And so my wife looks at me and she says, go back to work. And
Nice.
so I kind of bury, I suck it up, I bury it. And and then somehow or another, and without extending the story, is I fell into I was invited to be part of a leadership track through the health system, and that's where I learned how extraordinary doctor came about. And this is what I want to share with our listeners here. Is one is that my personal satisfaction came from Peter. It came from taking care of one patient, one colleague, and one surgery at a time. So that's that's what I was built to do, and that's what I did. At some point in time, it shifted, and I didn't look for it to shift, but it just happened that I wanted to change the perspective, not a person, but people. And so that was one thing I noticed right there is like, how do I do what I do and tell people my story and help invigorate them and motivate them? So that was one thing. The other thing that I noticed is you may achieve everything that you thought you wanted to achieve, ambition. And we're all ambitious people. We went to college, went to medical school, finished 7 years of residency. But that ambition never goes away. And you're practicing now, you have a flourishing career, you got all the cars that you wanted or whatever it is that's important to you, monetarily wise. And that doesn't go away because our DNA is ambition. Mm-hmm. And so what I also learned is that ambition transforms. So through this leadership, I learned that my ambition needed to transform. It was in another methodology. And the other thing I think now, as I look back, I'd say is a concept of choice. And I feel very strong about this, is that you will hear someone disgruntled, a physician disgruntled for whatever reason, say, I will never recommend this career to my kids. Oh, the system is against me. It's a very negative thing. And mind you, it's not perfect by any means, our craft or our industry. But we chose to go to 4 years of medical school. We chose to pick up from the skin knees and go into residency. We chose to pay for all this extra learning and get a job. So why would we choose to be disgruntled and have and almost a victim mentality about our career? And I wasn't gonna buy that. And so I did a mindset shift, And so that's kind of how, knowing those things about ambition and knowing about choice, knowing about how I wanted to help people, and that's how Extraordinary Doctor was born.
That's awesome. I'm thinking back my own experiences and 100 conversations I've had with other people about what it feels like to be burned out. And I've found just to reflect exactly what you said. I think when people feel like they don't have a choice, they're stuck in a rut, they're repeating the same thing, you can kind of get to where you say, hey, this isn't bringing me the same satisfaction and meaning. It might be new to the patient that I'm caring for, but I've done this same thing 100 times this year. And people can get a little bit into that burnout phase. And I think most people tell me it can hit sometime it can hit in residency, and then it can hit somewhere about 7 to 10 years into a career where you say, hey, this is more of the same thing. But I feel like the way to get out of it is just what you described. Number one is the patient say, hey, am I being here for the person who entrusted me with their care? And number two is knowing that you have autonomy. You can make a choice. And that's just what you did. You made a career pivot, and you escaped the idea that you were trapped in the same thing, and you went to a leadership role. And then you took it so far as to actually write a book not just about medicine and how to be a good neurosurgeon, but basically like how to be a good person and how to communicate intelligently with other people. And I think that's fascinating. I'd actually like to hear a little bit more about how you decided on that topic and specifically emotional intelligence. Having a neurosurgeon write a book about emotional intelligence is remarkable and unique. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I define in the book, as well as words I live by, is when we are finished training and we're out practicing, the definition of clinical success is taking care of the patient and doing the science. But I think a lot of us who are very ambitious, I would say majority of us, because of our ambition, we're looking for what's called professional success, not just clinical success. And professional success requires a different set of rules. And so what happened to me was that I felt proficient in the skill set that I had practiced for years, and I had honed them, and then and I was doing it. And it was very gratifying. But remember, my DNA is, as well as everyone listening, it's ambition. And so I, I will say I was looking for, how do I get better at something else? And whether it is a better investor, whether it was, and I did all those things. Usually it's investment or something like that is really common. But how do I get better as a person, or how do I influence, or how do I move up in organization to be part of the decision making instead of just being the clinical side of it? And so for me, it was about a self-discovery for self, because I knew what I was. I've been trained to be a neurosurgeon. I know what I am very well, but I didn't know who I was, in the sense of, well, what my values? What is a value? What did what did I not stand for? Things that made me a person. And that conversation that we just had a few minutes ago is, I was trained to be very proficient in something at the sacrifice of something else. So I was trained to be a neurosurgeon at the sacrifice of, I never got to develop who I was. And I think a lot of us, as we move through our craft, whether it's in medicine, whether it's in being a lawyer or an engineer or something else, the professionals, there's a piece of you that it's not that you ignored it. It's just there wasn't room for it. But when you're putting out to the real world doesn't really care.
Right.
You need to, yeah, you have to be able to suit up and be able to perform in different ways. And so that's where the idea of emotional intelligence came about, is, okay, what are the skill sets that I need to learn, that I'm learning myself through leadership and through mentorship, that I feel like are important, that can help me get the ball in the end zone for things that I can't do clinically. And just because I'm a doctor and I have a nice white coat and I walk in there with some authority, that isn't equal leadership.
Mm-hmm. No, and it's interesting just to think back on those, when you've kind of reached the top of your training in some way. Like, there's so many more things you can learn, and yet when I go ask my kids, ask what I do, they don't really care so much, like, oh, I really made that diagnosis, or I really did that procedure just right. They want to know what kind of person I am, and how are you honest? Do people respect you? If you had to end your career today, would you look back and say, okay, I I can tell you how many procedures I did or how many people I saw, but maybe that doesn't mean so much as the difference I made for the individual that was there in front of me, or the leadership that I inspired in other people, and hopefully left it better than I found it. And it sounds
Yeah.
like you've really kind of hit on that point quite a bit.
Yeah. How powerful is it? And I'll make a really simple example of this, that you're in the hospital, you have your white coat on, and you're about to walk into a room with the family members that are there, and you're about to talk about a grave diagnosis. And there's an audience in front of you. When you walk in and you have that certain amount of, there's certain physicians that just, when they walk in, what you feel comforted for, even if it's bad news. What is it that they have that they can do that I can't do? That I go in there and I'm just clinical and I just talk about it, and it's a very void, or devoid of any kind of connection whatsoever. But this other physician barely said anything and walks in there, and the family understands, even if it was a terrible circumstances, and felt like they've been heard and they were validated, and then and be able to leave the room. And from a physician standpoint, to be able to execute that in a very efficient manner, because we're very busy, and to be able to feel good about doing that, and then leaving the family in a position like, thank you for taking the time to do that, and then and leaving them in a better position than when you found them as well. And that's what emotional intelligence is.
Yeah, no, I've been a part of those conversations just like you have, where you're telling somebody news that is really bad, or something that's really challenging, and yet the feelings that you leave with are those of gratitude and graciousness and kindness, and they'll say, I'm so thankful that I had the interaction with this doctor that helped me through this thing, even though on paper you may say, well, I wasn't able to help them. They had something that couldn't be helped, and I think what you hit on is very powerful. What I want to know, what tricks could you share with our audience on how to do that? Because it's really subtle, but it's the art of communication and understanding that person in front of you. And I'd like to hear you just tell me more about
Yeah,
that.
you put me on the spot. So, yeah, what are the behaviors, the attitudes, and the conversation pieces? What do you say, and how do you act? In those certain situations. Well, I'll give you a very simple one. Let's say you walk into a clinic, and you're in the clinic, and there's the family members are there, and if they are sitting, I would recommend that you. And this sounds very basic. I would recommend you sit, because being parallel with them in the same station with them for 10 minutes is better than standing while you're standing and they're sitting, and you doing a 20-minute conversation. There's really difficulty to connect. So just physically matching them on where they are from a position standpoint it makes them feel that there is a connection, and you can deliver the same message or even a shorter message in that amount of time just by changing your station. So that's one simple thing, I would say.
Yeah, well, and I've found that same thing. Sometimes it can feel awkward at first. You walk in the room and I start rearranging the furniture and let's pull a chair around. Everybody have a seat. Let's get because I'm always in a hurry. Just like there's always 10 things hanging over your head as a doctor, and the patients may not. They may have been waiting for that conversation all day, or they may have just walked in. But I think that's actually a really powerful tool to take the time to just get on their level, or go get a chair or whatever it takes, so that you can sit down with somebody and they know that you're there. And it's kind of I think it's not really a doctor thing. It's just like a basic human connection thing. And
Yeah.
sometimes I think we get lost a little bit. We're so much into the outcomes and the sort of this mission driven medicine, like mission above all, that sometimes we forget that we're talking to really basic human beings who have those deep connection needs. And it sounds like you've really come to understand that.
Well, yeah, and I think you said two words: a doctor and physician. I think I'll parse them for my definition. A doctor is someone who's delivering clinical diagnosis, and now with AI these days, a doctor can be an AI, a tool that can discover patients can discover on their own. But a physician, within the word physician, it embodies counselor. And I'm not saying sit with them and be their priest or their preacher or something like that. But in some ways, you're there to bring solace and to kind of close the loop with them. Another way that that you can be able to connect with family. Let's say they come with, in that story before, there's a bunch of family members. You can sit and you can ask, well, who do we have here? And let each family member introduce themselves, or let the patient introduce the family members. Now, what you've done is you've brought everybody into the decision making very quickly. And so you can say what you need to say, and everybody's bought in with you, and you can still leave the room having that everybody felt that there was a connection with you. So those are small little things that you made me think of that when I was giving that other example.
Oh, that's perfect. Kind of reflecting on this a while ago, we talked a little bit about kids and our perception of our family members. And like you said, sometimes people would say, no, don't go into medicine. It's too much, too hard, too long, or it's too much burnout, and all these other external factors that seem to control our lives a little bit. So, well, I guess a question for you is: would you tell somebody that, and would you tell your own kids that? I'm curious what's your take on that? 17
Yeah,
years into a career.
yeah, absolutely. And so I'm not the poster child to advertise anything, and especially just in being a doctor. it took me a while to come to this realization. So I was also in the same boat. If you're starting your career practicing, I did the same things. I was grinding it out, getting those bills paid, the things that mattered. Mid-career, you heard what happened to me mid-career. I think that happens to every physician. It's just almost every physician. And now I'm kind of tailing out of the mid into kind of the late part of my career. I'm probably still in the thicket of the mid-career. And what I will tell you this, and I'm very sincere when I mean this, is I think it's the best profession. And let me tell you why. If you, I've had the opportunity to be involved with other industries. So I belong to a business forum called YPO, and that is an international business group that's well regarded across the world. And so I get to see other industries, real estate, finance, private equity, all these other people that are in these big names that we hear about in other industries. So I've been exposed to other people and how they think. And what, you know what, in the end, Peter, you know what everyone wants at the end? What I've noticed, no matter how many zeros they have in the bank accounts or how many accolades or credentials they have, they're always searching for, and I firmly believe this, they're searching for admiration, they're searching for respect, and they're searching for relevance. And to me, there's no other profession that gets that from day one and only gets better with time other than being a physician.
Hmm.
You please do not forget that. Only when you see in other industries that you'll see like, oh, well, they make more money and things like, yeah, of course, the economics may be different and the lifestyle may be different. But in the end, when you have served your time on this world and it's your time to go, did I feel like I was admired internally? Did I feel I was admired by someone, or did I have that connection with someone? That's important to me. That's as humans. What that people respect me and what I did, and your profession automatically does that. Was I relevant to somebody? Was I relevant to my kids? Your family members are given, hopefully, but you were relevant to a lot of people you took care of. And people who are in other industries don't have the opportunity because they have to show it and demonstrate in different ways. And so because of that, I've come back around and said, wow, this career that I'm in, that we have worked so hard that I chose, this is a good deal. Now let me figure out how to really embrace it, empower it, and really live it through the white coat to its fullest potential in the way I see it fit.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Nimish. I still think one of the states that I'm affiliated with had the phrase on their what was it, on their medical board. It said, still the greatest profession. And I agree with that. And it said, it was referring to physicians and medical care as the greatest profession. And I've kind of come full circle like you have, where you go to the times where you're like, oh my goodness, I'm sort of stuck and I can't get out, to where, hey, what really matters is can I form these deep connections with people? And you're right, you're placed on this really unique spot as a physician, more than just being an AI robot that tells you some information. It's not the information, it's the relationship and the connection and the meaning. And when you come home at the end of a busy day and say, yeah, I performed X, Y, and Z procedures, or I diagnosed something, or I prescribed some medicine that's going to help somebody, it doesn't mean so much as I formed a really deep connection with this person who needed me at that place where I was at. And I think that kind of stuff really does make it that deep, meaningful profession that we're all seeking. And I also like what you said about other careers. You can work for that admiration and respect, but boy, as physicians, you are granted that by your patients from day one, and you can lose it if you're terrible to them. But most patients, the default is, this is the physician. Let's sit down and listen to what he says. And that's a really unique place to come from as a young person,
Yeah.
especially.
Yeah. You matter. You will always matter. You may not know about, how the best investment may be, but you matter as far as when you say something, wherever you are. So don't forget that. And what I want to encourage, again, to my brothers and sisters, embrace that. Know that you always will matter. Doesn't mean that you need to be arrogant about it or you need to hide that, but that's what the profession is. So don't put down the profession, pull it up and again, embrace it. You've earned it. And so that's the whole point of the book as well, is let me give you some skills. Let me, as I said, let me put a little thumbprint on your brain to help just see the idea of what does this look like for you with people skills. And I know how to talk to people, but how do I influence? And let me just get some ideas of what that looks like. And so that's what I'm looking for, is just how to elevate you to your full potential if you're interested.
Yeah. Well, and part of that, and you already kind of alluded to this, is sometimes, especially early career, you finished residency, you are you're just totally broke. You have no money. In fact, I think my wife and I would joke that by the time we got loans paid off and we're back to being broke, I think I was about 38 or 39. I'm like, oh, okay, now we're broke again, back to zero. And it takes a while. And it kind of informs this discussion a little bit because early on, I think people are focused on, okay, I got to pay this off. And when you get burned out, sometimes the thought is, well, I just have to get out of this ASAP because it's too hard. It's too many demands on my time. But it sounds like you've come to the place where you say, look, the finances and the prestige and whatnot, those are not the biggest drivers. It's those relationships with the team of people that I work with and the people I influence. And I'm just curious how have you made that transition to go from focused on like the nuts and bolts of how to earn a living to now I want to make a difference and be a part of this team. Like that's an interesting transition.
Yeah, I think this is something I wish someone had told me, and this is kind of what when I was coming out of training and entering the workforce. And here's some just a really basic statistic is about 30,000 new residents come out into the workforce roughly, and about majority of them, 75% or more, will be hired, be employed by some type of corporate entity. So either it's a healthcare system, or it's academic affiliation, or it's some managed care, like Optum or something like that. So they're going to be part of some corporate structure. And as I alluded to before, is that the residents that are coming out and what we are taught from our predecessors is the idea of clinical autonomy. That I, as a physician, know how to make the decision, and I know how to take care of the patient. However, in the real world, what I found was that is a given when you come out. But when you are hired by a corporate entity, those rules supersede your clinical autonomy. And that's called organizational autonomy. And in order to succeed in organizational autonomy, it isn't the same way you do in the clinic or you do in the operating room. It's a different set of skills that allow you to become successful. And that's the emotional intelligence skill sets and behaviors that will allow you to flourish, therefore minimize the idea of this, I'm trapped, my ceiling is leveled because I have maxed out my clinical capability and what I can do for patients and things like that. And so I started to notice that as I was doing my 7 year, kind of 7 year itch, as maybe as I was practicing, that this was that what I was doing in the operating room was not enough. I need to also be very proficient outside the operating room. So, and that's how I started to learn this idea where there's a whole nother set of skills and rules that I need to get better. And that's where my journey started. And that's where I really found great satisfaction with that, because that was never presented to me before.
Yeah. Well, and that's a beautiful idea. There really are kind of a finite number of physicians in the United States. You think 30,000 sounds like a big number, but when you look at a comparative to how many physicians there are totally in practice in the United States, it's just over a million for a large country. And then how many people have retired or working part-time, or it's really kind of a small number. So it's pretty important for people to realize early on, just like what you've said, that you can make a tremendous impact on your colleagues and peers. And I think you can get to a place where you're not motivated by just having to pay off debt, but rather say, well, how can I find my way through this organization? How can I be an inspiration to my patients? How can I be a better person as a peer? And then I would say even as a parent and as a neighbor, like all that stuff that really matters. You can be good at your career, but everybody assumes when they go in to see a physician that you're going to be good at it. And they don't necessarily even look at the paper like, oh, Dr. Crane went to such and such residency. There are some that go through a whole pedigree, but most of them just walk in and assume that you're well trained. And so all these other extraneous, or not extraneous, these other core skills for life become so important. And you've really hit on that.
Yeah, I think you said something that's very important to me as well. The skill set, that the emotional intelligence that I'm working through, I'm far from perfect. And in the book, I talk about some of my failures and what I think other physicians will face themselves. Like they'll actually laugh when they see it because it's very similar. I still struggle with today, but because I live the book. I live those principles. I try to. That echoes into me being a husband and father, as well. So I'm a better man, a better person because of that. And so if you're looking just to be a better person, these skills are not just career focused. These are life skills that transcend. And what it does, it elevates you in a way, given your career and the pedestal that you're already put on by society, and given these behaviors and attitudes and mindset that you develop when you have emotional intelligence, that only makes your life even more empowering and much more fulfilled. And so I think it's just one of those things that, as ambitious people that we are, we're really presented to it. And I would love the idea of, if we could change curriculum to say, hey, and we could use the idea of you're moving into a corporate organization, and to succeed in a corporate organizations, you're going to need these skills. But these skills are more than just getting a good job. It's being a better person.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. So tell our audience one more time the name of the book and how to get it, because it sounds like it's probably a worthwhile read for lots of folks.
Yeah, no. Again, Peter, thank you. The book is called Extraordinary Doctor, and I just put a small plug in there because it just became a bestseller, which is I had no idea, but you can buy it on Amazon, you can buy it on any of the outlets. And um, what I ask is, if you're even thinking about, you want to be better, how can I be better? This is what I did. These are some thoughts that I came across. And again, this came from things that I was reading, and mentors and leadership principles and guidelines that really helped me. And I think if I can just leave a small thought with you, the rest is you will chart the course, because you are an ambitious individual and you will find your own way. But sometimes it's nice to have someone pointing a finger to say which way to kind of travel, go that way, and you'll seek what you find, what you want. You'll find what you seek, excuse me.
No, it's great. Well, I really appreciate it. Like, this has been a great discussion of not just what it means to be a good neurosurgeon, because that's really important. We need to make sure we're proficient in all the technical things that we do, but to be a good person, and to be and I've found, just like what you've said, the leaders I want to follow are, like, you can tell they're good, and maybe that's too subjective, but you can say this is a person who's honest, who looks at me in the eye and doesn't deceive me, and all those things that make us really want to follow other people. That leadership matters so much in medicine, both for our patients and for our peers. And it sounds like you've been able to have a wonderful experience with that.
Yeah, it's been an ongoing journey, and like I said, the person who I want to be is still yet to come. And so I'm on the journey of an extraordinary doctor.
Yeah, well, and I always tell my wife, work in progress.
Yeah,
You
that's
know, I
right.
think
That's
all of
exactly.
us, that's
We're
how we
all work
all
in
are.
progress.
We're all
Yes.
a work in progress. And to that end, for folks who say, look, I'm in that burnout phase and I don't know what the next step is, and I feel like I'm lost, and maybe I just need to quit and go find another career. I would echo what Nimish said. Like, find that place to really connect with the patients and with your peers and with that leadership team, and try to find a way to flourish. And I would argue, just like what you said, Nimish, emotional intelligence is the key. And I also think, like what you said, it's not just baked in. You can actually learn how to be better at it.
Yeah.
And it sounds like this book would be a good read for anyone who's seeking that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, any last thoughts for us, Nimish? I've loved this interview. It's been awesome.
Yeah. The only thing I would add to what you just said is you will find what you seek. So if you are looking to be disgruntled, if you're looking for the system to be against you, you'll find it. But if you're looking for, hey, how do I use this opportunity to become better? How can I be involved with leadership if that's what you want? How can I be more fulfilled? You will find it. So all I ask is take a step back and say, what is it that I think about all the time? And if it's something negative, I believe that you can change that perspective, and you can make yourself better.
Yeah, it's powerful words. Thank you so much, Nimish. I know our audience will love this interview, so thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Peter.
Thanks for tuning in to the Doctors Making a Difference podcast, and thank you for what you do to help your patients and your community. Your work truly helps so many people. We produce this content to help you have the tools you need to stay in medicine and to highlight the amazing work being done by physicians around the world. Please check out more of our content on our website, doctorsmakingadifference.com. Also, please follow, like, or subscribe on your podcast player or YouTube channel, and give us a 5-star rating. It really helps spread the message. Finally, if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, or if you'd like to nominate someone to be a guest, please visit the website or email me at admin@doctorsmakingadifference.com. See you next time.